Hey guys, this is John and Anam, and today we are back for another episode. And today we're actually talking about marriage. So, John, why did we decide to talk about marriage?
So a lot of our friends are talking to us about it. We ourselves feel like 3 to 4 years into marriage, we figured out certain things. We still have a lot of questions.
Yep.
It's a work in progress. So it's a constant conversation that we're having. And we're moving into a space where we want to be able to like openly and honestly express some of the aspects behind the scenes with people so that they can get a better glimpse of what it is to be in a marriage.
Yeah. And like, I think the other thing that we've always noticed, because we ourselves were in it for a really long time, is like the purpose of marriage as society or the world has claimed it to be versus the purpose of marriage that God has set for marriage.
Yeah.
Right. And so I feel like we should definitely start with this aspect is like, how are you seeing marriage? Like, what ideas do you have of marriage as you think about it? Like, is it a self-serving thing? Are you wanting to serve someone else in a self-sacrificial way? Like, and sometimes we don't think about these things. Like, I wasn't thinking about marriage in this capacity even before I got married. Even when I was a Christian, I wasn't like, you sometimes you logically know sacrifice, but you don't know it till you have to go through it. Right. And so I feel like starting off with like, what is your idea of marriage? What is the purpose of marriage in your life? What do you want it to do for you? Not just for you in terms of your goals, but like your character. 'Cause I don't think a lot of people think about their character and how everyone needs to build their character, and this is a way to do it too.
Yeah. We've kind of spoken on this before, but like it helps with edification. And Timothy Keller kind of touches on this.
Yeah.
I'll paraphrase kind of more or less what he said. He wrote a book called Meaning of Marriage. And if you can't get the book, he has a YouTube video where he consolidates everything in the book, and him and his wife kind of go back and back or back to back touching on it. So in essence, he was explaining that a lot of society today sees it as a me thing, kind of like what you just said. Whereas he would like to refer to it as a we thing.
Yeah.
It's always in the focus and the context of us. We are making the decisions. We are moving forward together.
Yep.
But he was kind of saying the way that we go into it sometimes, like nowadays, and even it's a day-to-day thing. Like you can even spot check your marriage day of and be like, is it me or is it we?
Yeah.
Because there are moments where we leverage each other.
Yep.
In a way where it's like, what's beneficial to me? And so he's saying that a lot of people get into that space where it's like, oh, I'm going into the marriage because of this. I'm going to benefit in this capacity, in this capacity. I'm going to find security in this. And don't get me wrong, there are means for you to be able to benefit and grow and be edified and even, be able to pursue certain things when you get into marriage. But when that is your main focus, you start distorting the meaning of it. It starts becoming something that's out of self-centeredness.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people realize sometimes, and again, it's not because, what I want to preface is like, we're still coming into this realization as we keep growing. But I feel like a lot of people subconsciously, you don't even know that you may have a self-serving attitude. It doesn't have to be with things. It could be with emotional needs even that you're putting on someone that you shouldn't be putting on someone because there is maybe pain in your life that you haven't resolved and now it's like directed towards someone to fulfill, right? And so I feel like this self-serving attitude, like honestly, we all have a self-serving attitude. We live in a world that is all about self, not about the other person. And that's why the gospel and like Christianity is so countercultural, because it is all about otherness, not self. And that's what marriage is about too. Like the reason why like I think divorce rates are going so much higher than like, let's say like even like 100 years ago, whatever, what it used to be, is because I think as a culture, we have shifted to the self.
Yeah.
And like prior cultures were communal, especially Western cultures, they're more individualistic now, right? Like something that's going to get in the way from your personal goals is going to be a problem, and it's not something that you want to pursue. And if that means a person or a relationship, then that's just not something that you want.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't be, like, I think we touched on this before too, like you shouldn't necessarily not avoid red flags.
Yes.
But like there is a deep opportunity for soul searching and seeking in yourself where you can start to acknowledge, oh, are they the problem or is it me?
Yeah.
And prayer is like one of the major components that comes to mind when it comes to finding the right person and then pursuing that with them, even when it gets bumpy. Because if God is asking you, yo, stay there, then it's beyond your understanding.
Yeah.
And maybe you need to ask why.
Yeah.
Because there's moments where you think, oh, this person, they're the problem. And I heard a good rule of thumb where it was like, I think it was from a boundaries book, where if you're having a problem with a person, and there was another book that I read this in as well, why don't you demonstrate what it looks like to be quote unquote the better person, in a sense, like whatever you're desiring of them, you yourself exemplify it and then just wait on it.
Yeah.
The person will at some point start to realize, oh, why are they changing? Why are they switching up on me? Wait, as a matter of fact, oh, maybe I need to change too. But I think often is the case that we find ourselves in a position where we are blaming and not realizing is really us.
Yeah. And this, like, now that we're getting into like God being part of the relationship, and it makes me think like the definition of a marriage, even like what is a marriage in a biblical sense? It's a covenant. And I don't think we think of it that way ever. So we actually have a friend who created an art piece for us for our wedding, and it was based on Ecclesiastes 4:12, which basically the actual art piece says a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And we have it hung up in our bedroom because it's a constant reminder that we're not the only ones in this marriage. It's also God. God is covering for us where we can't cover for ourselves. And so he's giving us the grace that we need, and he's helping the other person also give the grace that the other person needs, or whatever. Like, he's constantly covering our weaknesses towards ourselves and each other in marriage.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a good place to start. Like, in regards to covenant, we've seen covenant, maybe it's because covenant is so far removed from our society right now.
Like, what is a covenant?
So a covenant is more than just like a legal obligation or like a contract, let's say. It's even more than a promise. It has those components within it, but it's like a deep commitment to one another. And that is hard to come by right now. Like, in terms of even marriage, friendship, it's a hard thing to see, because when you live in an individualistic society, you start to think for yourself. Your first thing on your mind sometimes, I don't know, skepticism. There's a form of cynicism of like, oh yeah, they're gonna hurt me, and I gotta guard myself. And some of us do a little bit better, and we're like, you know what, nah, they won't hurt us or hurt me. And then as soon as we get hurt, we're like, I don't know, I'm gonna close up now, I'm gonna retract. And that's appropriate, don't get me wrong, but sometimes that becomes a long-standing wall, a means of blocking people out, and we retreat and isolate. And in a covenant, right, at least how God shows us how he exemplifies covenant, we've hurt him how many times? And it's not to say go ahead and take advantage. No, it's to say he is hurt by those things, and he still desires to be open-hearted to us. Obviously with boundaries. Those are needed. He puts restrictions. Hey, listen, you hurt me in this way, we're going to back up a little bit. We're going to back up a little bit. And that's what he did with the Israelites. Every single time they hurt him, it's like, okay, listen, and a little more and a little more. And my point is just that he never gave up, though. However, that's hard, because that's God. And that's why covenant is so difficult, because in order to fulfill a covenant, it has to be 3. It always has to be...
Well, a marriage covenant,
in a marriage covenant, yes. But even what I'm trying to say is God always has to be in the mix. Because in your weakness, where you feel you can't follow out that contract, when that person is, acting up or making you feel some type of way, it's like, you know what, Lord, I don't trust them, but I trust you. So I'm going to respect your daughter. I'm going to respect your son. I'm going to respect that company or party. And I'm going to move forward with integrity, dignity, and respect. That doesn't mean I won't have boundaries, but it definitely means that I'm going to continue loving from a distance, but loving.
And the thing is like marriage is supposed to be a reflection of our covenant with God. And marriage is like the most intimate relationship you can have with someone on earth, like with another human being.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking about like, that's so crazy that God uses marriage, a really intimate relationship, to show his depth of love and commitment to us as like his bride type of thing. And I feel like that's why we have to take marriage so seriously. Like marriage is just a symbol of a representation of the covenant that God has with us, but I think it's actually even deeper.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, the respect that we need to have for marriage and this idea for marriage, like, you're right. Like the Bible is an amazing example of how often we fail, but how committed God is. And if you have two committed people with God in a relationship together, like there's times where one person's not going to be able to commit as much. And what I mean by commit is you're still staying faithful, but maybe you're coming in like, you know, with a little bit of energy, with a little, or maybe you're coming in with some sass or attitude or something like that, but the other person is going to keep committing with God. They're going to get that strength from God to keep showing grace, and it's constantly covering each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just a beautiful way for God to, I think, like sometimes I think like that, I think it's so beautiful how God created this type of relationship so that he could show us, and guys, like my relationship with you is even deeper than that of marriage. Like I think your relationship with God is something that I'm not going to be able to completely understand, right? And vice versa with me and God.
Yeah.
But because we're married and now we have God in all of this, like I'm the closest person to you who can understand to the best of my ability with God what's going on with you.
Absolutely.
And even then, I'm not going to be able to completely understand because it's you and God, right? But it's like there are tiers. It's you and God, then you, me, and God, and then it's like friends and family and things like that, and community and church and whatever, right? But that's the utmost respect that we have to give to marriage, is that right after you and God is then you, your spouse, and God.
Amen. Yeah. And you kind of already hit on this, but like Genesis, it explains that Adam
Yeah.
was alone, but he wasn't. And we've touched on this, but like he wasn't alone, but God still felt like he needed someone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that he needed someone even though God was already there.
Yeah.
Like that's the apex of relationship, but God is still saying, hey, no, there's more to it, you know? We don't see the word covenant in Genesis 2 per se. We see aspects of it because it explains like, and that's why, as a matter of fact, it says bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh.
Yeah.
And it says that's why man will leave, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking into that a little bit. I'm not going to get too nerdy on it, but that word in Hebrew was, I think, abaz. I'm probably butchering it. Don't get me wrong. But my point is, when I was looking into some stuff on it, it was explaining that it even wasn't just to leave.
Yep.
It wasn't to leave. It was countercultural at the time, by the way. Like the woman would leave her family and conjoin with the husband, right? But the husband didn't necessarily do that. But God is calling both of them to a form of exclusivity. So it was like the word abaz actually can not only mean leave, it can mean forsake.
Yep.
So it's so serious. It's such a serious relationship that one has to leave, another has to leave. Nobody interjects, and they figure it out with who? With God.
Yep.
That's pretty tough.
And that's basically our second point, which is mutual commitment. Like there's covenant, and then now it's like you mutually have to commit. Like both of you guys have to sacrifice. Both of you guys have to agree to certain responsibilities to each other even. And like it's not going to feel fair if like one person has to deal with, let's say, certain things and you don't want to. You both have to be willing enough to go into this, like, I'm going to deal with your anger. I'm going to deal with your frustration, and you're going to deal with my anger and my frustration, and I'm going to deal with your sadness. And what I mean by deal is going to help you and support you through it, and I will support you through your sadness. It's like, what can we both do for each other? And honestly, that's why you need God, because then you need the energy for that. Committing to each other is basically choosing to be faithful, and I don't mean just in a physical sense. I mean in an emotional and mental and spiritual sense. Like I'm gonna be faithful to you in that I'm gonna make sure that I'm keeping your best like interests in mind, even over mine. And I'm going to constantly try to talk to God about what does John need? Because I don't know, God, help me figure it out. And I'm going to make certain sacrifices so that you can be taken care of. And if both people are doing that, then guess what? We don't have to be so worried about taking care of ourselves, because then the other person is taking care of our of those needs sometimes too. And it's not to be like, oh, completely, don't take care of yourself. It just means like, sometimes you have to choose between yourself and your spouse. And in my opinion, you choose your spouse.
Yeah.
Right?
That's within the confines of a covenant. And like I mentioned before, Genesis 2 doesn't necessarily say the word covenant.
Yeah.
At least I didn't see it.
But it's an example of
it.
it.
Yeah. But we know that marriage is a covenant because of a couple of different verses.
Yeah.
So we spoke on this. Malachi is probably like a weird example of it. But I believe it was, Malachi 2, 14 through 16. And I think the context was like Israel being unfaithful. So in this specific passage, it was explaining like you are breaking your marriage covenant.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was just like, see, okay, that's a covenant. In regards to being able to pour out into each other, even before you pour out into yourself, within a covenant, that makes sense. Why? Because I will pour out into you, and I will literally look out for you, even during difficult times for me, where I'm just like, no, I'm good. Because I know that as soon as I pour out into you, God pours into me.
Yeah.
He's that third individual that is willing and able to back us.
Yeah. And that's why we have these marriage vows, like during our wedding. Like, and I think I highly suggest you constantly look at your marriage vows.
Yeah.
Your marriage vows might even like get deeper over time, but like at least look at your marriage vows to be like, this is what I committed to. And it's the basic marriage vows of through sickness and health, for richer and poorer. Like, then what does that mean? Are you willing to walk this life with the person if they lose their job? Are you willing to walk this life with the person if they become a millionaire? Are you willing to walk this life with the person if they have huge like sickness or illness issues or whatever? And you know what I mean? Like, and that's where it becomes serious of like, everyone is going to have I think that's the other thing. Everyone's going to have issues.
Yeah.
You're not going to avoid someone who doesn't have issues.
No.
And at that point, you really have to self-reflect. Am I willing to take on issues? And am I willing to help someone? And can someone help me even work through certain things and not abandon me through things, and I won't abandon them?
And I think the reason the divorce rate is difficult, like is high, first off, even within Christian context, is because a lot of us, I'm not going to pretend that I know every single situation. I just feel like when we don't lean on the Lord and self-efficiency comes in, like my number one thing for helping you out, I'm not going to lie, is not like resolving the situation for you. It's like, yo, Holy Spirit, come through. We praying. Like I'm praying, and oh man, there are moments where I don't even have the words.
Yeah.
I'm just like, listen, God, show me how to help, because there's moments where like you're distraught or you're hurt because of like outside factors or just a stressful week.
Yeah.
And for sure, I can show up with a couple of things here and there, and it'll definitely do something, but it's not in our capacity to be able to heal the heart per se.
Yeah.
That's God's domain.
Yeah.
And we better come to him for those types of those injuries and those instances.
Yeah. And the one thing that mutual commitment reminds me of too is like, so this is my idea, is like your guys is when you guys come together, your whole vision of your life, it is going to change because you're interweaving someone else's everything, who they are, what's going to happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like not everything is going to work out as planned.
Yeah.
And it's, can you commit to each other during those times when things go unplanned, when someone else gets a job and you have to move for it, or when they lose a job, or when they have a purpose, a calling in life that God's calling them to, and it's completely out of left field, and you're like, wow, I want to support you, but dang, this is hard because of the sacrifices I would have to make for this, right? And it's okay, like you don't have to be like, yeah, I want to do this, like you know what I mean? Like you don't have to jump on board immediately, but it is going to require you to reflect and be like, I don't want to be disobedient to God. I want to support my spouse. And sometimes it's wrestling with God and working with God through the hard times of like, God, where are you taking me? This is really different. And the example I want to give here is you just got called to be a pastor. And honestly, I never imagined myself to be a pastor's wife. Ever. Like, ever. I don't even know what it is to be a pastor. I don't even know what church is like because I haven't even been in the church that long. And I feel like I know for a fact God is calling you. I've seen you through things. I've seen you work with people. I've seen you dedicated with people. I've seen how God works through you. And I've seen people affirm you. But then you married me. And now I'm just like, God, what are you doing right now? Because like, I don't know if I could do this. And honestly, right now, it's not that I'm mad about it. It's like, God, help me wrap my head around this because I don't know what it looks like. I want to do a good job. I want to be supportive. And honestly, this is where God is showing me through someone else, through your spouse's calling, I'm calling you in specific ways. And I started realizing like one person's calling, it doesn't mean it's just this person's calling. There's certain aspects where it's just going to be my calling, your calling, whatever. But because we're married, we're always going to be interwoven in each other's callings, right? And we have to be supportive of it. And that takes a lot of prayer and a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of dedication. And we were talking about it earlier, and you asked this question of like, what's your favorite aspect of marriage? And I told you like, it's my least favorite, but it's also my favorite. And it's because it's my least favorite because I feel like God is constantly showing me how much I'm messing up and all my flaws and everything through just being married. Like, not that like, oh, you're bringing it up all the time, but it's like, I notice like, oh, sometimes I have an attitude or sometimes I'm not speaking to you in a way that I should or whatever. And it's just this constant reminder. And I'm like, wow, God, like, this is hard. This is a pruning process. And I don't like it. I don't like being put on the spot and having to see all the suckiness that I have in my character. But then at least I get to work on it. And at least I have someone who gives me grace on it. And then I'm seeing myself get better. And that's why it's my favorite part, because I see myself growing. And that's just what marriage is. It's literally this pruning process.
And I think the last point, you kind of already touched on it, but pruning, man, I don't know how to even explain this, but it's taking off what's dead and what needs to be removed.
Yeah.
There's a total surrenderance.
Yes.
That's required when you come into marriage covenant, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know what? Mediocrity ain't for me. And when you see, like even on my end, when I'm acting up or whatever, it's God's like, oh, word. And I'm like, checked. And I'm like, okay, moving forward, because he's calling us to be better than like, it's a reflection. Marriage is a reflection, just one of the different types of instances or an image of who he is. And so no, it's never going to stop at mediocrity. It's never going to be like, oh yeah, you're in the relationship now, you tied the knot, you're good. No, it goes significantly past that. And that's the mentality that I'm striving to hone in on every single day, because there's moments where I'm just like groggy. Cool, act right. And then there's moments where I just like I bump my toe into a table. I don't know how I would have done that, but cool, act right. And it keeps your character refining process going. And it is beautiful. It's difficult, but it's beautiful. So all this to say is that just it grows you. It pushes you beyond the limits that you're comfortable with. It gets you out of a place of just kind of content here, but the reality is I'm discontent overall. And it pushes you into a place of like, wow, I never even thought this could happen. Like, it's almost like winning something you never thought you had it in you. So that's kind of like why I see marriage as a beautiful thing. It pushes you, it encourages you, it's ironing it's iron sharpens iron. That's exactly how I see it.
And the verse that we had for this specific point is Ephesians 5:21, which is submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, because that's what marriage is about. It's about you guys are both helping each other in your relationship with God. And you guys are so close that you're going to be able to check each other on things and help each other on things and support each other on things. And honestly, the whole soft rebuke thing, like, you know, help each other fix certain issues, so that at the end of the day, as time goes on, you guys are both getting closer and closer to each other and to God in that process.
Yeah.
And I think that's what God wants. Like, surrenderance is a form of dying to self, dying to your pride and your ignorance and your just unwillingness. Like, Christ died for us. He literally broke his body for us. And it's a constant reminder, like that's what marriage is. Like, it's dying to yourself so you could serve the other person. God gave us 2 commands: love God and love your neighbor. I mean, you're my first neighbor. Like, as in, like, I have to love God and love you first and foremost before I can love anyone else. And if I can't love God and love you, then how the heck can I like serve anyone else? I have to serve you. This is our first ministry. Before this podcast, before church, before anything. If we can't serve each other the way that God needs us to serve each other, then how is it that we can show up for other people?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously this is within the context of marriage, but like in marriage, there are moments where you feel alone. You're not. Out of marriage, let's say being single, Paul refers to that as a gift as well. Marriage is a gift and being single is a gift. I bet you ask the right person on the right day, neither of them will claim those to be gifts, but I believe that they are. And what I'm trying to say by this is that Paul explains that in singleness, you're still married. You're still the bride of Christ. And I know that you mentioned this. You mentioned baptism is like a wedding, in that, like, it's a public declaration that you are choosing God, just like how a wedding is a public declaration that you are choosing your spouse under God. You know what I mean? So that's why I liken it, like, I've heard our mentor say it a lot, so I've started to internalizing that is a wedding. That is you being like to everyone else, hey guys, I'm committed to God. Public declaration. And so, like, even if you're single, or even if you're in the context of marriage, even if you got out of a marriage, and you find yourself in a place of like, you know what, nah, that covenant thing is over. No, you're still bonded to God. He already bought you at a price. And he, like you mentioned, his body was broken on our behalf. So the next step is submission, is falling in alignment with what it is to be married. Even if we don't have a partner, or if we do have a partner and we're not feeling it that day, we have a responsibility to come to Christ first and foremost. Within marriage, within the perfect marriage, within being single and loving it, in any context, in any relational status, first and foremost, Christ.
All relationships have to glorify Christ in some aspect. Your relationship with yourself, your spouse, your friends, your family. If there's relationships in your life that are not glorifying Christ, and that's a problem. Because baptism was you publicly declaring your commitment to God. You're gonna respect my boo. So like, you know what I mean. Sorry. So I think that's what you have to keep in mind, is like practice that with God, because I like the way that you said that, where marriage is literally like, I worry about the people who are so excited to get married, because I'm like, the excitement will wear off, guys. But nah, the zeal is so needed. The zeal is needed, but it's like sometimes a little too much, because it is an over not an exaggeration, but an overglorification of marriage in terms of just the idea of getting married. And it's like, just remind yourself of what your relationship with God is like. There's moments where he's quiet. There's moment where you're not getting answers. There's moments where God's giving you another direction. You're like, wait, no, I'm not ready for this. That's what marriage feels like. It's this constant roller coaster, and you think you're like you think you finally got it, and then boom, there's another like dip or something like that. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I mean, I appreciate God, because he's put me in places where I never thought. This marriage has brought me to places that I never thought would even be possible in my life. And yet here we are. And one thing that
he did, and like what we're journeying through right now is that whole pastoral ministry thing. And one person advised me, don't go in with the most heightened version of an expectation of like some lofty etc. And I'm like, okay. And I kind of found it to be a little pessimistic, so that's why I'm saying take all this with a grain of salt and pray on it. Zeal is good. However, what I'm trying to say is prayer is better. Expect that they won't be your God. They won't be perfect is what I'm trying to say. And that's okay, because there's room for grace in all of this.
So I guess my advice would be for anyone who is thinking about marriage is or thinking about who they want to marry, things like that, just keep in mind is like you're always gonna have life problems, problems with yourself, and someone else is gonna come in with their problems. Who is that person that you're willing to endure these problems with? Because you're always going to have to endure the problems. But who is that person that you're wanting to do it with? And that will give you good insight of like, all right, maybe that person is it. But
Amen. Okay, guys, thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you felt like something in this touched you, reach out. If you want prayer for anything and anything,
for your marriage, for how to think about marriage, whatever it may be, like definitely reach out to us. Any questions you have, again, we're only 3 years in, so we
got all the answers
at all. We're not, but I feel like we've started to understand certain things about our characters changing, and honestly, marriage did that.
So shout out to marriage.
Get
yourself a boo.
Okay,
I'm sorry. All right, peace.
Bye guys.